Beware the otherworlders, the traitors, those with tongues of sweetness but with minds that lust for blood. Do not take them in, do not give them succor. Well were they named Voidbringers, for they brought the void, the empty pit that sucks in emotion, a new god, their god. These Voidbringers know no songs, they cannot hear Roshar, and where they go they bring silence. They look soft, with no shell, but they are hard. They have but one heart, and it cannot ever live. Thus reads the words inscribed on the Ilias Stele, the oldest known text on Roshar, and a window into the planet's true history, long forgotten by the human civilizations who inhabit it today. Welcome to our second video on the Stormlight Archive. In our last video, we presented a pocket guide to Roshar, introducing you to the peoples, creatures, nations, and magics that exist in the alien, windswept planet upon which the series takes place. In this video, we will explore the ancient prehistoric origins of the storm-battered planet, discover the true history of her original peoples, and the true nature of her gods. We will also dive into the true identity of the Voidbringers, the alien army which, according to the Vorin religion, set off a cycle of endless apocalyptic wars which drove humanity to the brink of extinction. Viewers be warned, spoilers for all 4 Stormlight Archive books and the Cosmere as a whole lie ahead. We will begin our story today not on the planet of Roshar, but at the very beginning of the universe as we know it. Indeed, the events of the Stormlight Archive are inextricably tied to the Cosmere, the vast transplanetary shared universe in which the world of the Stormlight Archive exists alongside the worlds of all of Brandon's other fantasy novels, such as Elantris, Mistborn, Warbreaker, and so on. Incidentally, we have already published a comprehensive guide to the Cosmere on this channel, which we recommend you check out as a supplement to this video. Although much has yet to be revealed of the inner workings of the Cosmere, we know that it was created by an entity known as Adonalsium, who, for all intents and purposes, was God. Moreover, we know that before the Cosmere came to exist in its current form, a group of 16 mortals came together and conspired to destroy God. These mortals succeeded, and Adonalsium was murdered. Upon his death, the power of Adonalsium was sundered into 16 shards, each one an aspect of his personality. These shards were devotion, dominion, preservation, ruin, odium, cultivation, honor, endowment, autonomy, ambition, invention, mercy, valor, whimsy, and virtuosity. As of the publishing of this video, the identity of the 16th is unknown. Each of the gods' 16 mortal murderers claimed one of the shards, becoming known as shard holders, and coming to possess a fragment of divinity. Although Adonalsium's murders had once all had their own unique personalities, the power of divinity overwhelmed them, and they became overcome by an overpowering desire to follow the intent of their individual shards. In short, the 16 had killed their deity, and in so doing had become gods themselves, albeit ones arguably stripped of their mortal identity and completely bound by the personality of the shard they had claimed. After the shattering, the shard holders scattered, either creating their own planets, or settling on planets Adonalsium had created before his murder. Wherever a shard settled, they brought with them massive amounts of investiture, the spiritual energy which empowers all of the Cosmere's forms of magic. Indeed, each of the worlds which came to be inhabited by a shard developed magic systems powered by investiture, with the form and nature of their magic determined by the influence of the shard holder on that world. Throughout the Cosmere, myriad civilizations came to thrive upon myriad planets, whose people came to worship their resident shard holders as gods. Initially, these inhabited planets had no interaction with one another, for the shard holders had formed a pact to never commingle and leave one another to their individual spheres of influence. However, that agreement was never going to last, for while some shard holders had inherited the more peaceful aspects of Adonalsium's personality, and had a mandate to ensure growth and stability within their individual pockets of the Cosmere, some shard holders had inherited the more violent and passionate aspects of the murdered god, and were thus compelled by intent to disrupt the peace. It would be this inevitable clash between the living shards of a dead god that would ultimately become the main source of conflict in the Stormlight Archive. But before we get into that, let us talk about the origins of the main planet the series takes place on, the windswept, storm-battered, and creme-caked plains of Roshar. The planet of Roshar predates the shattering of Adonalsium, and was created countless millennia ago by the moribund god before his murder at the hands of the 16. Even in that impossibly primordial age, the landscape of Roshar would have probably been more or less recognizable to anyone who lived on the planet during the events of the Stormlight Archive series. Much like it is in the present, prehistoric Roshar was shaped by high storms, massive, destructive, world-spanning hurricanes that ravaged the planet's surface from east to west once every few days. This resulted in Roshar's bizarre and alien-esque biosphere, which featured vast swathes of land without topsoil, dominated by retractable trees, sturdy rock buds, skittering cremlings, lumbering great shells, and many other species of flora and fauna with shells thick enough to withstand the high storm winds, or other evolutionary functions capable of shielding themselves from the gale. Indeed, perhaps the only prominent part of Roshar's modern ecosystem, which did not exist at the time of the planet's genesis, was the race of humanity, but more on that shortly. Prehistoric Roshar was also home to the Spren, Fey-like creatures native to another layer of reality known as the Cognitive Realm, or Shadesmar, but capable of manifesting into the physical realm in hollow ethereal forms. The Spren of this era were mindless beings, no more self-aware than the base concepts they embodied. However, they were capable of forming symbiotic relationships with Roshar's native wildlife. By allowing a Spren into their gem heart, a life-giving gemstone found inside the anatomy of most of the planet's indigenous species, various Rosharan animals received various benefits. For example, by bonding with Spren, the huge hardened carapaces of creatures like chasm fiends were made lighter, allowing them to grow to otherwise impossibly large sizes. Perhaps the most versatile of bonds that existed in this period was between Spren and Roshar's indigenous sapient humanoid species, the Singers. At the beginning of the Stormlight Archive, the Singers, known to humanity as the Parshmen, are a docile slave race, barely capable of speech and independent thought. However, deep in the mists of prehistory, this was not the case. Before the arrival of humanity on Roshar, the Singers were a vibrant, intelligent race with many songs to sing. Humanoid, but not quite human, the Singers were a crab-like people, with marbled skin of swirling whites, reds and blacks. Like most species indigenous to Roshar, parts of their body were covered in hardened carapace. The Singers' name came from the fact that, unlike humanity, whose languages are expressed through phonetics, the Singers communicated with one another primarily through sophisticated musical rhythms. Moreover, like other native Rosharan species, the Singers possessed gem hearts, which they could allow Spren into to form bonds with. Although the so-called Parshmen of modern Roshar have only one form, slave form, their ancestors were capable of forging bonds with different types of Spren. In so doing, the Singers transformed into different forms, such as work form, mate form, nimble form, and war form, each one slightly altering their morphology to specialize them for a specific aspect of life. Sometime during this primordial era of Rosharan history, the landscape of the planet was enriched by the arrival of two shards of Adonalsium, honor and cultivation. The two shards harmonized well together, for both of them had peaceful intents. Honor's intent made him a being of order, committed to upholding oaths, agreements, and the natural laws of the universe. Cultivation's intent made her a being of transformation, committed to the growth of things and people. Like every other world created or settled by a shard of Adonalsium, the arrival of honor and cultivation on Roshar infused the planet with massive amounts of investiture, the energy which powers all magic in the Cosmere, and this resulted in profound changes to the tapestry of life on the planet. As a result of their influence, new species of intelligent Spren began appearing, both in Shadesmar and the physical realm. These Spren were fully sapient, and capable of both speech and critical thinking, and likely forged strong bonds of friendship with the Singers. Some of these thinking Spren were many in number, such as the Honor Spren, Cultivation Spren, Ink Spren, Reachers, and Cryptics. Others, however, were one of a kind. One such unique Spren was the Stormfather, the physical manifestation of the High Storm given sentience by Honor. By elevating the Stormfather, Honor transformed the High Storms into a manifestation of his power, with Stormlight, a gaseous form of Honor's investiture, blanketing and enriching the planet's surface with every world-shaking hurricane. Before long, the Singers had come to worship Honor and Cultivation as their gods, and under their gods' guidance, The Singers likely achieved a highly advanced civilization during this time, building prosperous cities which rivaled anything that humans would build in later millennia. However, this golden era of Roshar was not to last, for soon new arrivals would come upon the windswept planet, bearing with them a new god. They came from another world, using powers that we have been forbidden to touch, dangerous powers of spren and surges. They destroyed their lands and have come to us begging. We took them in, as commanded by the gods. What else could we do? They were a people forlorn, without a home. Our pity destroyed us, for their betrayal extended even to our gods, to spren, stone and wind. Beware the otherworlders, the traitors, those with tongues of sweetness, but with minds that lust for blood. Do not take them in, do not give them succor. Well were they named Voidbringers, for they brought the void, the empty pit that sucks in emotion, a new god, their god. These Voidbringers know no songs, they cannot hear Roshar, and where they go, they bring silence. They look soft, with no shell, but they are hard. They have but one heart, and it cannot ever live. The Ilia Stele. While honor and cultivation were putting their roots down in Roshar, a third Shard of Adonalsium was tearing a path of destruction throughout the Cosmere. This was Odium, the Shard of Fury, Contempt, and raw untempered emotion. As the Shard holders dispersed after the shattering of Adonalsium and created their own planetary spheres of influence, Odium refused to invest in any world, and instead set out on a cosmic mission to search for and destroy his once companions. The first victims of Odium's interstellar manhunt were the Shards of Devotion and Dominion, located on the planet of Sel, where the novels of Elantris and the Emperor's Soul take place. Odium killed Devotion and Dominion, but much like with Adonalsium, these fragments of God were not destroyed entirely but splintered, their investiture fragmented across their world in ways that still impact the planet of Sel to this day. Odium next travelled to the planet of Threnody, where the Shard Ambition was invested. Odium attacked Ambition, and after a vicious, world-shaking fight, managed to splinter her as well. The sheer volume of investiture thrown about between Odium and Ambition's fatal struggle tore Threnody apart, and to this day, the planet remains a dark, twisted place, mangled by the interdimensional scars of two warring gods. After killing Ambition, Odium travelled to Ashen, the first planet from the Sun in the Rosharan system and a neighbour to the planet of Roshar itself. Unlike the bizarre alien landscape of Roshar, the biosphere of Ashen was largely Earth-like, featuring green fields of grass and animals like birds and horses. Ashen was home to a native population of humans, and upon Odium's arrival upon their planet, these humans began to worship the Shard of Untempered Passion as their god. At some point, Odium began empowering the humans of Ashen with his investiture, and teaching them a form of magic known as the Surges, dangerous powers capable of tampering with the very fabric of creation. Eventually, the rampant and unregulated use of the Surges triggered a planetary cataclysm which destroyed Ashen, engulfing the vast majority of its surface in flames. In the modern Vorin religion of Roshar, the planet of Ashen is remembered as the Tranquiline Halls, the paradise that awaits all virtuous men and women in the afterlife. Very few among Roshar's modern human populations are aware that their species is not native to Roshar, and that the Tranquiline Halls are not heaven, but their original homeworld. Indeed, with their planet rendered uninhabitable, the humans of Ashen embarked on a mass exodus, using the very same surges that had destroyed their planet to now flee its surface and travel to the nearest inhabitable world, which happened to be the neighbouring planet of Roshar. Humanity first arrived on the storm-swept plains of Roshar around 7,000 years before the events of the Stormlight Archive series. Naturally, they quickly encountered the native singers, who were commanded by honor and cultivation to take in the refugees and give them a new home. The singers had no choice but to obey their gods, but there was a major issue. Humanity was an alien species on Roshar, completely ill-suited to life on the planet. Humans were soft, squishy creatures with no shell or protective carapace to speak of, and the same was true of their livestock they had brought with them. Cows, pigs, horses and chickens were large, soft-skinned mammals, which lacked the protective carapace necessary to withstand the brutal high storms. Fortunately, there was one region of Roshar that was suitable for human habitation, the western edge of the planet's megacontinent, a region now known as Shinovar. Separated from the rest of the continent by a huge mountain range which served as a massive windbreak, Shinovar was the only place on the Great Risharan landmass largely unaffected by the high storms. Thus, the human refugees were given Shinovar as their new homeland, and for a time it seems as if they assimilated peacefully into their new home and developed amiable relations with the indigenous singers. However, this was not to last. For when the humans of Ashen arrived upon Roshar, they had also brought with them their god, Odium, and wherever Odium went, chaos and discord was sure to follow. Indeed, Odium had come to the Risharan system for one reason: to murder honor and cultivation, in the same way he had murdered devotion, dominion, and ambition. It is very possible that he purposefully orchestrated the destruction of Ashen and the exodus of humanity to Roshar to help further this insidious goal. Shortly after settling in Shinovar, the humans decided that they were not satisfied with what they had been given, and launched a violent invasion of the rest of the Risharan continent. Within a generation, they had overrun the planet, and pushed the indigenous singers to the fringes of their own ancestral homelands. It is unknown what exactly compelled the humans to do this, but it is almost certain that Odium was crucial in the breakdown of relations between humanity and the singers. To the singers, this was the ultimate betrayal. They had given humanity a new home, only to be turned upon. Among the singers, the human invasion of Roshar became known as the First Desolation, and was forever immortalized in the collective trauma of their species. Consequently, humankind became known as the Voidbringers, for humanity knew no songs. Humanity was alien to Roshar and could not hear the rhythms of the planet, and wherever humanity went, only silence followed. Thus, the hidden truth behind the mythologies of the Vorin Church is revealed. The origin of the Voidbringers, the otherworldly demons in Vorin scripture who caused an endless cycle of apocalyptic wars in Roshar's ancient past, were none other than humanity. The First Desolation would not be the end of the story. Humanity had dealt the first blow, but the singers would strike back and fight to reclaim their planet. All the while, the shards of honor, cultivation, and odium would pick their sides, and the war fought between the two mortal species for the fate of a planet would quickly evolve into a war fought between the immortal fragments of a dead creation deity with the entire Cosmere hanging in the balance. In our next video on the Stormlight Archive, we will cover the cycle of desolations and the creation of the Heralds, the Fused, and the Knights Radiant. To make sure you don't miss that, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, commenting, and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.